So yeah, okay. So we were talking a little bit about web apps and kind of the differences. The biggest thing is that web apps are available for everyone. So anybody that has a browser can utilize it. You don't need to install Access locally. People can't get at the back-end tables. You know, I know that that's a concern for some people, where you know, if they have an Access database, if they don't understand how to kind of nail things down with security, people are just copying the database and taking it home, and they can get at all the back-end tables. So all of that's done for you. You know, unless you create a data sheet, and within within your screen, you're allowing them to see, you know, a data sheet or specific data. They can't get to any of that stuff. They can't copy it or anything like that. And then you can also build in a lot of other features. And as in this case, I've actually got an Office web app. This is Bing Maps that's built right in, so you can extend Access using these kind of things without requiring people to install like an OCX control, which can be a little bit of a pain depending on what the client's environment is in. So as more and more of these become available, you can install these Office web apps directly into whatever application that you're wanting to. With the screen that I have up is the Waterfall Calc. It's an app that Tom and I have spent over the last 2 years developing for the mortgage industry. So it's being used by, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen different mortgage lenders across the U.S. So it's, this isn't, smoke and mirrors. It actually, people are designing web apps, and it does work. It does exist and that kind of stuff. So I just briefly go over what Access web apps are about. So good. So that's all I have. Tom, if you want to take it over and talk a little bit about if you want to go back to the client and talk about setting up the client environment and setting up how to how we email, how we allow people to email from the app, that'd be great. And I'm gonna test out something else technically, so I'm gonna let you do that for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll be back.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
Don't forget to give me control. And what I'm gonna eventually show you, hopefully, is how I set this up with again with the waterfall system that Andy and I reference quite often. And one of the things that you need to do is, it's not that big of a deal to set up an ODBC connection, but then the problem is that you've got to be able to store your password in there. Otherwise, every time you go to access the data, it asks you what your password is. So that's another little bit of code that I came up with, not on my own. I found some, like a lot of us do, found some online and modified it to fit what I needed. So that's kind of an extra step too. And then what we did was we left the desktop running on a machine at all times, and I set up a special table that said such and such is asking for whatever report, and every 60 seconds it would pull that table, and if it found a new record, it would do what it needed to do as far as sending whatever reports, mark that they were sent, and then it would just continue on. So that runs continuously, and that way when the user is asking for a report, they get it within a couple of minutes. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give Andy a phone call, since he's apparently not getting my email. So I'm going to go mute here for just a second while I call Andy, and then I will be right. Okay, well, I'm not able to get hold of Andy, so I think what we need to do is maybe let's talk about anything else that anybody else has question-wise. I guess that's what we were doing this month anyway, was kind of general questions. Does anyone have something else that they've been wondering about? Maybe I can help you with that, or maybe somebody else that's listening could.
One of the things.
Tom, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I just was exploring was trying to set up the database so that it looks like what you have, so that I can have clients that will come in, they'll enter data, maybe get a report or something, but they don't have the ability to change the design of the database or the design of the web page. So I figured out, I learned from the Programming Access 2013 book to make a subsite, and then installed my database there, and then I set up the contributor group permission. But the strangest thing, when I first set it up, it also made that when I signed a user to that group, I don't know if this is making sense, but they had more permission than I wanted.
Okay.
And so they could still edit, and they could actually modify the database. And so I went back and did it a couple of times, and it seemed, I made them just a visitor, so they was read only. That worked fine. And then anyway, I just let it rest. And I come back another day and test it out, and now the contributor group is working, where they don't have any option to edit things. They don't have the option to modify and access. Is the contribute permission group what you use for your databases that you want other people to enter data into?
Honestly, Andy is the one that sets that up as far as our company here, and I haven't used that in any of mine. Andy, are you back online?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay. You kind of left me hanging there without the presenter control.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So you couldn't share your screen?
No, I could not.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
We've been talking.
Okay.
I didn't catch the name of who just asked the question. We
Charles.
Kind of got to a point here where we were going back to questions. Charles, you want to just kind of give a quick example of that again, and Andy may be able to answer that.
Well, just in setting up the permission so that I can have clients go into the database, enter data, update information and like that, but they can't edit the database itself, and they can't change things on the website. And what I was using was I set up a permission group that was called contributor, right? That's one of the options. Is that what you're using for your database? So that they can edit the data, but not the layout or the design or things like that.
Yeah. So really, what happened when 2013 was first released, they didn't really have an option inside of Access to prevent people from actually editing the database itself, editing the forms and queries and stuff like that. So what you ended up having to do was go into SharePoint, and within SharePoint you would set that user's property to contribute only. And when they're set as contribute, they don't have access to that little if you see in the top. Are you seeing my screen with the map and everything?
Yes.
So up in the top right, we have settings, which allows us to choose customize and access. So within SharePoint, if you gave that user only contribute properties, then they don't have the ability to do that. Since that happened, when you're developing a new database within Access, you can now choose that you want to basically make the database read-only in terms of design, so that it kind of takes care of this, that icon issue within Access even before you host it.
Oh, really? When
yeah.
does that happen? When do I get that?
They released that probably, I want to say about 4 months ago.
Huh.
So now I'm going to do a brand new custom web app. Actually, let me do it.
And the owner will still be able to edit it, just the users won't.
Correct. The owner can still do it, but the users cannot. Let me see if we can.
That's what I want. That's perfect.
Yeah, there's actually a delay here. I'm not sure. So you've got you've got snapshot and deployment, and let me click on new here. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember where you see that, because there is it's
Andy?
something. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Kevin here. So go
Yeah.
in and go back to where you were. And sorry, in the
Just to do new or
no, just go into package.
okay.
So this save, and then go save for deployment,
Okay.
and then locked.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So locked.
That basically removes the gear and I think it removes the gear and maybe anything else. It removes the open and access, I know, and I think it'll also remove the insert, app for Office.
Perfect. Yeah, so there you go. So under deployment, you've got this checkbox called locked, so that basically it doesn't allow people to, by default, they can't click on that little, settings icon. So it prevents them from doing that. But I think it was released, maybe about 4 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, it seems like.
I see. Okay, well,
but
yeah, great.
It appears the data's read-only also. It says it can't be edited. So if you have a record that you want somebody to contribute to, they won't be able to do it. I'm reading that below where your mouse is. You see that? Data and read-only. Read-only tables. I got it. Oh, it's in the read-only tables.
Yeah, because you wouldn't normally have them as read-only tables.
Right. I didn't see
Yeah, exactly. So, and then in terms of the client-facing, I think part of the question was were you asking like what clients see from the front end?
Well, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is for we've got one client and they're in the automotive industry, and what I've done for them is I actually created three different parts of the web app, and what I did is for they buy steel from a company called Bilstein, which is out of Germany. And so what happens is we have a vendor-facing page, so that when Bilstein puts these huge rolls of steel onto the ships to come over, they log into the web app, and they only see the stuff that we allow them to see. So they log in as themselves, the vendor, and then they record. Okay, here's the order. This is when we put it on the ship. This is expected, receipt date, kind of a thing. And then we actually there's another company out of near Detroit, and what they do is they take these huge rolls of steel and they log in and they accept the steel, and then they break it into parts. And so they actually take that steel and break it into pieces. And at that point, they load it onto trucks to come to Holland, Michigan. And then in Holland, they actually store that steel, and what ends up happening is they turn it into they load it onto this rack. It's like 2 football fields long, and it turns it into rails that car seats go on. It's really interesting what you run into that you really never think about on a day-to-day basis. But they have all this huge press that turns it into rails that car seats go on. And so we've got both. We've got the vendor side going that way. We've got the manufacturing side going, which is the internal people. And what we actually track internally, what roll of steel made what bins of those rails, because if there's ever a recall, we need to trace it all the way back to that roll of steel. And then whenever it's shipped to clients, whether it's Ford or whether it's whatever company, they keep track of what goes there. And then from the client side, although I don't think they've let the clients see it yet, but the clients can actually would be able to go in, and they have their own interface where they have their own logins, and they only see the screens that JCI wants them to see, and so they can see only their stuff. So there's actually 3 different. It's all in the same database, but they see different parts of the system depending on who they are when they log in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really a slick way of doing it. You don't have to release multiple copies of the database. You don't have to worry about data falling into the wrong hands. So it works out real well. And Maria said, "How do you do that?" Maria, I may have missed what your question was. How do you do this locked part, or how do you do the interface that I mentioned?
Well, maybe the login. How do you separate the views? Is it using their Microsoft login, or how do you present it?
Okay, good question. So within Access Web Apps, there's a couple different ways of deploying it. One way that with the Waterfall Calc system that Tom and I created, we actually give we license the SharePoint licenses as well as so we charge each user $5 to $10 per month for that, because we want to allow them some of the features within SharePoint along with the Waterfall Calc app. And so we actually charge them. But for every license that you have, you can actually have, I believe it's 500 kind of anonymous users that can go directly to the app and use the app. And then the app can, instead of you creating a SharePoint login for them, you're kind of giving them a generic login to get to the main form. And then once they're in the main form, then they actually log in. So if we in here, when this first opens up, there's actually a log. You would actually have a login that happens before this that allows them to type in their own username and password that you assign them, and you're really just keeping that name. That name and password for this app is kept within just tables that you have in your Access Web app. It's not users that you set up in SharePoint itself.
So you're building it inside of Access itself. Is this like the
so you're building it inside of Access itself, correct?
So there's 2 logins.
Now, like I said, what's that?
So there's 2 stages to log in. First is log into the Microsoft SharePoint account, and then the second is logging into the specific of the Access database.
Right, and you can again, it just depends on what you need it to do. For the Waterfall Calc, when they sign into SharePoint, basically, we pass those variables into the Waterfall Calc app, so they're not having to sign in a second time.
Right.
It actually knows the email. There's what's called work email that's set up within SharePoint, and we pass that work email address over to the Waterfall Calc app, so we know when they get in here who they are. And if we have different levels of protection in here, so that if the email address exists in SharePoint, but there's not an email address in the Waterfall, then it's kind of do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're just stuck. Or we have there's features that we have so that we have within the Waterfall Calc we have two main types of client users. One are what we call lender admins, and one are called lender users. And the major difference is, let's say you have a company, Quicken Loans, and they have 100 loans that are in the Waterfall Calc. The Waterfall Calc basically takes mortgage loans and calculates to determine what should happen with a loan that's in foreclosure. And so we set up lender admins, which is usually it's one person, but you can allow others. But what that lender admin can do is they can see all loans that, for instance, Quicken Loans uses. Whereas a lender user can only see the loans that are Quicken Loans that only that user entered. And so we allow the client to, if they want them all to be lender admins, that's fine. But most of the time they only allow them to see, the one user. But
right.
the thing that I love about this is that for the longest time, when IT people talk about Access databases, I consider it herding cats, is because it's, you've got 70 databases running anywhere on your servers or on local hard drives, and it's hard for IT to control. Now you can turn over that control over to the IT department so that they can control the SharePoint logins for people so that doesn't happen. As soon as that person is no longer an employee, they don't have access to the apps, which is perfect for the IT side of things.
Great.
Good.
Can I ask another just quick question about that locked? When you save a database for deployment and you check the lock, and then you upload it to say your sub-site is where I'm putting on a sub-site. Then if I want to modify it, does that mean I have to? Will I still see the gear so that I can edit it, or do I have to actually?
Yes. Yeah, you as the admin are the person that loaded it to that
right.
area, and
okay.
so you have total control over that that icon.
Great.
And you can open it up for other people to be able to do as well. It's just it's saying, hey, we're going to turn off by default. We're going to turn off that icon so other people can't do it, because it's easier to turn it on for people than to have it on for everybody and then turn it off. And
right.
I mean, when we first released the Waterfall Calc, we didn't even know it. I don't think Tom noticed it. I certainly didn't notice it. And I don't think any banks ended up doing it. But had they clicked on that icon, they could have downloaded our whole app. Not that they could do anything with it, because it's it's kind of hard to figure out what we did. But they could have been able to download it at that time. So that was a needed and very welcome change.
Thank you.
Good questions. Maria, did we get your question answered as well? How are all the other forms hidden on the main tab? Okay. So what we have here is these are a listing of as you create different objects, they appear, the tables appear here. All we do is we just, you can click on it, choose the, the little, come on. I don't know what the deal with my internet connection is here today. Yeah, of course, I clicked on it and turned it off. So here, you can hide or unhide these. So what we do is we have this little welcome screen that they first get into, And really all that welcome screen does is, for us, we have internal controls that determine who the user is. We match the email addresses, things like that. And then we didn't really need it, but I added this little support one so that they can call our client. They can call it. They don't call us for support because they call our client for support, and then if it's technical issues, then our client calls us. But that way, you don't have all these tables open up for everyone else to see.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What was your comment?
Oh yeah, sorry. This was just going back. You had mentioned that the gear when you lock it is there for the admins, and I don't think that's actually the case. It's actually hidden for everybody, and the reason for that, it's designed to be deployed to the store. And so if you put something out to the store, whoever installs the app is actually going to have kind of the admin rights because they have to have it to install the app. So by removing the gear, it makes them harder to get it open and access and then walk away, by packaging it up. So when you're doing your development, if you have a locked app, you'd have to open it from access. But in theory, your package is going to be unlocked when you're working on it, and then you're going to package it up and ship it out as a locked app. But if you ever have to open an app that's locked, you're going to have to play some games.
Gotcha. Okay. I was thinking that the admin that hosted the app automatically had it with the, being able to get back into it, but that's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
It's actually that actually writes some information actually into the packaging manifest. So
gotcha.
The kind of support is, you start your app and you package it up and then you ship it out, and so your client won't have that gear, even though your client is installing it on their SharePoint site, which they're going to have all the rights for. Right. So somebody's going to have to be kind of an admin owner to install the app. So normally they would see the gear. So in the store model, obviously you don't want them to kind of be able to walk away with your app by just saying, "Oh, package it up."
Right. So then do you have to submit patches to if you're going to upgrade your app?
Exactly. So that's the second piece. Had you shipped out like version 1 of your app that was not locked, and they open it up and do something just as simple as like change the, move a control one click over and save that, the entire app is now marked as being edited, and any upgrades will fail. So the good news is they can package that app up, reinstall it, and then it's clean, and then your changes will go on to it. So it's not like once it's locked, or once it's marked as dirty, you can never get it. But you have to go through that step of, saving the app out and then copying it back, which can be kind of messy. But if it's a app that that's locked, it shouldn't be able to get into that state of saying, "Oh, I'm dirty, don't update me." And then you push out version 2 of the app, and it basically flattens all the system tables and replaces those, but all the user data is maintained.
So then you would just create another deployment on your master one that you're working on. Yep. You would make another deployment, and that would be version 2. Yep, and then they would take that and install it, and it would update.
Can you sorry, Andy, can you click on the Save as Deployment again?
Yeah.
So you'll see right there's a version number. So anything greater than the existing version, as long as it's the same app ID. So what you don't see in here is that anytime an app is created, there's a GUID that's stored in the app. And so the combination of that GUID and the version number determines, can I upgrade or can I not upgrade? So if you try to upgrade an app with a different GUID, it'll fail instantly. And it'll say, hey, this doesn't match. You can't upgrade, app A with app B. App A's got to upgrade App A, and App B's got to upgrade to App B. And then in addition, the version number has to be at least one, minor, major revision. What's minor? There's another one in there. Has to be at least one greater. So you can't upgrade version 1, or so you can't upgrade version 2 to version 1. It'll say, no, you can't do that. You've got to go something greater.
Right.
And then in addition, if the app has been edited at all, it won't upgrade.
Right.
So it's obviously not foolproof, but the intent was to make it very, very hard to wipe out some information that you couldn't recover. Now, I would still recommend making a backup if you can, just because that's good practice.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and the way I Kevin, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that a great way, I think, going forward of utilizing that is if you have a version, 1.0.0.1, and you throw it on, like I've got a little area on our site called Sandbox, and that's where I go and I do the playing and testing things and stuff like that. And I think potentially what you could do is put your database there, test everything in a .1 environment, make sure everything's working okay, then create the package, and then go back to your recreate a deployment package and put that 1.0.0.1 over the 1.0.0.0.
Yeah.
That way you can test things in a sandbox environment, and then you can apply it once you have those things tested out.
Exactly. And you really probably want to do that in either a different site altogether, like a different domain, or create a sub-site. And if you create a sub-site,
I actually had a call from someone about a month or so ago, and they had run into a problem where they were trying to have the same, and it was, you can't have the same GUID on the same site, in the same area.
Right.
And they were trying to put them next to each other. And I was like, okay, did you try putting it in a different spot? And that worked totally fine. So you can't have two GUIDs in the same sandbox.
And I want to say there's a little caveat someplace that I'm trying to remember in the back of my head. I think if you just create the app from scratch from Access, or even just from SharePoint, so you create the app the first time, I think that kind of dirties the site for all apps. So you then have to go in and package it up and install it through either the side loading or through your corporate catalog, or I guess potentially even the store, in order to be able to install that same app in another sub-site. I think that's how it works. There's some anomaly that when you install it, it just figures this is the only app that's ever going to be here. So you'll eventually have to kind of delete your original app that you started creating with in order to install it in multiple sub-sites. I think that's the case. I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting. Good information. Great questions. So, did that answer everyone's questions? Maria, did that answer your question as well?
She was asking again about the filtering. Can you unhide the forms via code? Is that how you make the different screen for different users?
Yeah, what we do is depending on who's logged in, when that person's clicking this enter view loan calculations, we know who they are based on their internal login, and then we use that to determine what pop-up that we open. And so, like I said, we've got a lender admin, we've got a lender user. We also have what's called a super admin, which are Tom and the Toms and me's of the world, that we want to be able to see all the stuff that we want to, and we have sometimes we have hidden buttons for testing and that kind of stuff. The only difference is that when we open it, by default, we don't see live customer. I believe we did this. That we don't see live customer data. We only see the test data right off the bat. So that if we're in there and we're getting, showing somebody what we've done, like what we're doing here, they're not seeing real clients and real loans, that kind of stuff. Because for some reason banks frown on you seeing that kind of stuff from everybody. Not that you can do anything with it. I mean, there's no social security numbers or anything like that, but there are loan numbers and mortgage loan numbers. Not that I can't imagine anybody would do anything with it, but you have to be on the safe side.
So in the Waterfall Calc, is pretty much everything pop-ups? All of your views are pop-ups except for the first two?
Yeah, when you get into that, I mean, you've got to pop up. We do have change views, in some cases, because we do have but for the most part, they're pop-up windows that pop up, over them.
Yeah, Andy, I'll step in here for just a second, just kind of explain that. What we found, we ran into a very specific situation where, and I don't recall exactly what was happening, but because we had it set up originally where we weren't using all pop-ups, but if the system lost track of what user was logged in, then all of a sudden they could see everybody's loans, and we knew that was not acceptable. So the way around that was to give everybody their own entry page, which is, a nightmare if you want to change things, but it was very safe because it was based on a query that only allowed that person to see their company's records. So that's how we kind of ended up with all pop-ups, but it works fine. The only thing that I've noticed, like if you're editing a loan, so the entry page is a pop-up in front of that welcome page that Andy showed you. So when you change a record and it says record saved, it's kind of behind the pop-up. That's the only downfall that I've seen in doing it that way. But that was kind of a specific situation that we were trying to avoid. So that's why we did all pop-ups.
Thanks.
Good. Any other questions about change views and pop-ups and deployment? I ran into something I wanted to point out too. This is the first time I've run into this, but I wanted to show everybody is one of the interesting things that happens is that when, and I'm trying to make this bigger for people can see, is when if you create an app, but you haven't touched it in a while, what Microsoft does is they actually move, if it's been 3, 6, 9 months and you haven't touched it, they actually take the app and they move it to like an archive server so that it's not taking space on production servers. And so this today, actually, I was going in and I was looking at our some macro examples that we had from the third session, and this is the message that popped up. This is the first time I've seen this, but it just says, "Welcome back. Your app was archived because it hasn't been used for a long time. Please wait till we reload your app." And so it kind of puts it off, to a server that's not used all the time. And if you do end up needing it, it will go in that first time. It'll move it back to a production server so that you have quicker access to it. But what happens, especially when people are getting into Access Web Apps, is they're testing things, they're playing around with it, they're creating apps. Maybe they do it one time, maybe they play around with it for 2 or 3 weeks, but then they don't touch those again. So this is kind of a smart thing to do, is not putting it on production servers that we use, but kind of pushing it off. So this is the first time I saw that message, so I thought it would be good to share it to the group in case that happens. So, Tom, did you cover what you needed to with the client side and the emailing stuff, or
Well, I was just getting started because we I kind of in
Technical
several different ways
difficulties.
tried to get in several different ways I tried to get hold of you. So we kind of talked through it. I'm not sure if you want me to start that now. Because it's going to take a little while to go through it. Maybe we should push that off to another month, and I can go through that again. Because I'd really like to kind of get into the code and
okay.
and how that all works, and it's going to take a little bit of time, I think.
Okay. Let's go ahead and open it back up for people, because it is kind of like an open mic night, and I know that we'd gotten some questions ahead of time, but I'm not sure who asked what questions. So with the people that are on, what questions would you like answered right now? Okay, so Maria was interested in the return var stuff, so that's good. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into that, and I'll kind of show you a little bit about the return vars. So within Access, there are different kinds of variables. One is called the local var, and with an lvar, it only works within the macro that you're in. So you can set a local var, let's say lvar first name, and once that macro is closed or you're done with it, you move on to another form or whatever, that it doesn't retain that variable. A temporary variable stays in memory whether you open forms or open other views. Wherever you are, that temporary variable stays in memory until you clear it out. And a return var is basically a way for you to pull data out of another data set, like another table or something like that. And so what I wanted to kind of show you before we started our thing tonight, I wanted to give you kind of a little bit of an example of what how a return var works, because it's different than the other ones. And so what I did is I don't normally do it in a production environment, but I happen to be in the Waterfall, and so I created a button at the bottom so that nobody would see it. And so I wanted to kind of show you how that worked. And so let me see if I need to refresh this. Okay, good. So in here we have a combo box. This is just a little form. It's not based on any table. I just have this combo box that's based on a little table, and I put in 3 names. I'll show you that in just a second. And so what I have here is we've got just Andy, Bill, and Tom. And when you click on it, this is based on a table, and the table just has a few fields. It's got an ID number, first name, last name, occupation, cell phone, that kind of stuff. And so this combo box, obviously, it's based on an ID. So if I click on Show ID, it's going to pop up this message, and this happens to be number 1. So that's number 1. If I chose Tom, he was the second entry I did, so you'll see that says 2, and so that's what it pops up as. So we're going to take a look. I'm actually going to jump over to Access so you can kind of see this. So I'll show you how this is. And so I've got this Z-Form Andy AWA test, and actually I think I've got them all. Let's do Andy. Okay, so I've got a table in here. Let's open this table just so you can kind of see what the data looks like. And I'm not sure why I have a slow internet connection right now. Come on. Always seems to happen when I'm in a demo, doesn't it? So when this pops up, what's that?
I said, at least you can show your screen while you're talking.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It's picture this.
Does every form that you make have to have a table associated with it? Like you said that.
No, actually, not at all. Just like in Access, you can have an unbound form.
Yeah.
And so in the form I was talking about, let's go. Oh, there it finally popped up. So this is the table that we have, but I do have this form that I'm going to open also, and you'll see this form will go into design view of the form, and when we look at this, the form has no record source at all.
I think
so. It's got no record source. The person, if we click on this, there's no control source because there's no fields in the form, but the row source is based on this table that I just showed you, the ZND table test. Here's where the data is pulling from just for this one field. And in this case, I've got a bound ID called ID. It's just the ID, the first auto number field. And then I have the display field as first name. And so we have that so that when we're viewing it and we hit the drop down, you don't see the ID. You don't need to see the ID field that it's based on, but you see the first name that's there. And so let's go back to Access for a second again. Okay. So what I did is I created a couple buttons to kind of show how things work. So this is just a show ID button, and if we look at the expression, the macro that this button does, is I've got a variable set up, just a temporary variable set up, and the value is what is in the field. In this case, the object is a CBO select name, so it's grabbing that value, which is like the number 1, and then I just have a message popping up to show what that value is. Now, this combo box is the source is the ID, so you only see 1, 2, or 3. So that's why when I click on Show ID, up here it's showing the number 2, because let me close this out again. Close this. Again, when I look at the table, Tom is ID number 2. So that's how, that's kind of what it is. Well, in this case, what we want to do is have the form that we have, the view, we want to have it look up the occupation. So this is a very simple example of what to do. So in order to make this work is we need to set up a data macro. And what a data macro basically goes and I'm going to pull it up. I named all these Z with Z's so they appear at the bottom of the list. So that's why you see Z's on all of them. So if we look at this is the data macro that's actually grabbing the data that we want to pull up, and then it's going to send it back to our form. And so we have to set up the data macro first to tell it what we want. And I'm just showing you just a very simple example in this case. So what we're telling it to do is we set up a parameter. In this case, I called the parameter name ID, and the type is a number. It's just a number. And so when we actually call this data macro, and I'm going to go back to the form so you can see this. Look at the onClick property. So we're calling the data macro called ZMCR find occupation. That's the data macro we were just on. So we're telling it to pull that up, and then we have to pass it a parameter. So you'll see this par name ID. Where is it getting this name? It's getting it from the data macro itself. So when when we set up this par name ID, we know that that's the parameter that we're passing the data macro so that it knows what to pull back. And so, again, I'm going to kind of go over that because I know it can be a little tricky for people. So the button is going to run a data macro, and it's going to say, hey, I want you to run this macro, this macro find occupation. I'm going to pass you the parameter name. The parameter name happens to be the combo box object that I'm on. So it's saying we're going to pass it the number 2, for instance. And when I pass it that, I want you to pull back the return var, the rvar occupation. I want you to pull back that text, and I'm going to set a local var, which is only used in this macro, only used here within this form, and we're going to call it lvar occupation. So we're going to set a local var to whatever is pulled back from the return var. In this case, there's only one record in here that has the ID of 2. So when we pass it the CBO select name, which happens to be 2 in this case, we're telling it, give us the occupation, and we're going to set it to a local var. Now, you can do different things with this local var. In this case, I just wanted to show you a message box to pop up what that occupation was. So what all we're doing is saying, hey, give me that return var, give me the occupation back, and then show me what that is. Show me that message. And so so when the user clicks on this button, takes the number 2 from here, goes into that table, it looks up ID 2, it says, oh, the occupation is senior developer, and so we're going to pop that up into a message box. And so to see this in use, in here, if we choose Tom and we click on occupation, it's going to show us senior developer. If I choose Andy and I choose occupation, it's going to show us programmer, because that's what it shows us here. Andy is programmer, Tom is senior developer, Bill Gates is retired. And so if we look at, if we want to choose Bill here, choose Bill and choose occupation, it pulls up retired. Now this is a very, very simple example. You can do different things with that data. You can do different calculations and things like that. But in this case, we're just doing a lookup of the record. Now there's other things that you can do within this. Is right now we're doing a lookup a record of within this table where the ID number from the table is the parameter name that we passed it, and we want to set the return var, this rvar occupation, to the expression. So zTableTest is the name of the table, occupation is the name of the field. You don't even have to really remember this. As you start typing, it'll remind you what the tables are. It will remind you what the fields are. So if instead of occupation, we wanted state, we could do that. I'm not going to change this. I just want to show you that. I'm not going to change all the field names and stuff. But by doing that, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to close out of these. We don't really need to have those open. Save all that. And so now in here, if I were to just hit occupation, you'll see that it pops up. It's looking at the value for that here. Now, we told it to look for, instead of occupation, we're actually telling it to look at the word state, and so that's why it's passing. That's why it's passing that. So so the lookup is one thing that you can do. Something else that you can do, which is also very helpful, is let's go back to the. Hopefully I call them all Z. So in here, I'm going to pull this back up again. So in here, we're running this macro that's just find occupation. Now the find occupation, it's only finding one record. But in some cases, you may actually want to, there happens to be only one record with the number 2. And so that's why it's doing that. But there may be cases where you needed to loop through multiple record set. And so to do that, we're going to go back into the macros. And I'm just going to show you that instead of choosing look up a record in here, you'll see that you've got what's called for each record. And so you can have it say, okay, for each record that is, less than $20,000, make the new salary, 5% more than that, or whatever kind of a thing. So you can have it not just, the example I show is it's going in and it's pulling back information, but you can also tell it to update things. So you can say, hey, for each record that it finds where, just copy this, copy for each table in ZAndy where this condition exists, then maybe we want to tell it to edit the record. And maybe we'll want to set a field equal to something. Maybe you want to take and multiply a number by 10% or 20% or whatever it is in order to get it to do what you want. So in the first sample, I'm just looking up a record, just flat out, go look for this in this table, return occupation. This way that I use it is for every record that matches this particular condition, do edit it and do these other things to it. So you're editing the data.
So that's how you make an update query.
Yeah, this is kind of like an update query. Almost identical to an update query.
Because you don't have update queries.
You're doing it as a, what's that?
Because you don't have update queries online, but you have a data macro that you can use. Exactly
right. Yeah. So this is just like looping through record sets in VBA. So yeah, it's just like looping through a record set, and that's why I say that there are features that right off the bat we say, oh, this is missing in web apps. It may not necessarily be missing. It's just that you have to think about a different way of doing it. One of the cool things that I like about macros is that when you have, Tom and I have some huge macros in here. If we were to look at some of these, it's just got tons and tons of stuff in here. Well, what's really cool is you can actually group some of these things together, and so there's what's called a group function, and so you can only see parts of the macro that you want. So you can shorten and grow it as you want. That's something you can't really do in VBA, and I don't want to say that. So that's just kind of a quick side note. One of the things I like about the macro work. So Maria, I want to make sure, did that answer your question? Do you have any questions about it? I know I kind of blew through some of that kind of quick. So is there does that answer your question, or do you want to see do you need to see more, or do you have any other questions?
It's really useful for me.
Cool. Yes, I have trouble referencing the different types of, like, the syntax. So do you have an example, Maria, of something that you've had trouble with? Oh, local vars. Okay, so yeah, so the nice thing about the macro language, actually, I'm going to pull up this one for a second. The nice thing about it is, if you're looking for something in a table, as you start typing the table name, it'll automatically fill in for you. Tom, are you moving around on my screen? You're freaking me out.
Sorry, I didn't realize I still had mouse control.
So from that standpoint, if you start typing like the table name or table name and then dot and then the field name, it'll fill in that for you. If you do make a mistake on what you're typing, for instance, like here where value, if I type in like equals CBO select name, what you'll find is it'll pop up this little exclamation point, and it will tell you the expression you entered has a function name or operator that it can't find. And so generally there's something within this field that's causing it to be wrong. One of the mistakes that I made early on is I would do this. I would start typing in something that didn't actually, like if I do the CBO, and I would have it, but I wouldn't have square brackets around it, and that obviously can cause a problem. So as long as you type it and it kind of finds, in this case, the CBO select name is something that's on the form, that this is a button on the form, so it knows that there's a control on that form as well. And then there are, you can use your standard plus, minus, times, and all that kind of stuff. What can be kind of tricky, and Tom did a whole session on functions, is that a lot of times we're asked to create functions which are maybe, like in our class, we had our client had all these functions in Excel that she had written, and some are like an index function, and some other strange functions that you can only do in Excel, and you really just kind of have to think through. Okay, that's how it existed in Excel. How can we rewrite that within here? And some of it's just flat out experimenting. I know Tom and I did a ton of experimenting on different functions to make them work just right. To this day, he created this one function that replaced the index. That he's just a genius. It's just. There's no way I would have figured it out, but there's always a way. You just have to think through. Okay, I don't have VBA to work with. What's a way that I can get the information that I need? So if you have a particular, the thing to remember with local vars versus temp vars again is local vars are only within the macro or the form that you're on. So if you're doing something with a form and you change view to something else, you've lost whatever that LVAR value is. It's just it's no longer there in memory. Whereas if you use a temp var, that temp var you can pass from one place to another. And so with Tom and I, when you first open that form that you saw on our Waterfall Calc page, it passes it the email address to the work email to determine who the user is, what their capabilities are. So when they click that big button, on the welcome form, when they click that first big button, and it takes them to the next screen, it's narrowing down what can they see on the form, what queries that form is based on, so they can't see other clients' records or even other records within the same firm if they don't allow that. So hopefully that answered your question. If you have a specific one you want us to figure out too, we can certainly do that. I always feel when I pause, I should be playing the Jeopardy theme in the background. So if you've got any questions about that, go ahead and ask. We had another question from John. I'm not sure if you addressed it, Tom, but John had asked me right today whether there was a way for us to determine whether we could see the modified by or modified date within the client. So that's something that if you want me to pass control over to you and you can take a look at that, that would be great.
Well, I
Kevin
did some looking at the beginning while you were talking, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that to see how we could pull that out of there. Offhand, I do
Kevin,
not
are you
know.
still on? Kevin might know.
Right.
John, Kevin, are you there?
I am. I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah. So John was asking, there are some properties within when you create a SQL Azure table that you can see, but he can't see them in the client side. Is there a way to expose those on the client?
I'm not sure. I mean, you're talking about modified on a record level?
Yeah, on the table itself, the modified date on that. It's
at the record level or at the table level?
At the record level.
Because I don't think there's any attribute.
I believe it's at the record level. John, let us know if that's wrong.
Maybe John's left. Yeah, there's only 5 people in the call.
Looks like John left us.
So in the 2010 web database, when you published a table up there, it added the kind of created by modified, etc. information. But that I don't believe happens. Because you can open up the back end in SQL.
Right.
You can basically say, select everything into a table. And I don't believe there's any hidden fields that you don't see.
Okay.
If you wanted to get into and see, let me see. You can expose the actual object tables. That's a great. Let me bring up something here. Table select into. Read only. Yeah, there's a created and a modified at the object level. So I can go in and I can see when an object was modified, per se, and who created it.
Right.
There's a last modified, a created by, and a modified by.
Yeah, but you're saying that at the table level, not at the record level.
No, you'd have to write your own.
Yeah.
So add your own fields there and put a trigger in there, or a
right.
data macro.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that too. I mean, you could easily create that.
But I'm pretty sure there's nothing baked in, and you can get to the table to see when the objects were modified, but that's not going to, and that's not exposed in the web app. So you have to do that out in VBA effectively through link tables or something like that. But yeah, there's no way to get to that schema from the actual web app.
Right. Okay. And then I remember, and I think we talked about this at one point, but I remember sometimes when you created a table in the web app, but then when you were looking at the tables through ODBC, there were tables called images that went along with it.
Yeah.
What were those for?
That's for the images, and that's.
But what if you don't have a you don't have a field in the table that has images? Is it just there for in case you have images in the future?
Exactly. I'm not sure why it was done that way, and that's something that I want to say has been in there for 9 or 10 months. It's possible to have an app that doesn't have that. In fact, I've got an app with a bunch of images that failed the upgrade, so it's kind of stuck in this wonky state. But most apps should have been upgraded. And for every table in there, you'll see the table name ? Images. And the question mark is there because it was kind of a, it's something that you're not going to see in the wild, and you should never use on your own. So the odd chance that somebody said, oh, I want to have, a products ? Images table, that would break everything. So, it's a pretty remote thing. And in fact, I think we probably block you from creating a table with ? In it. But we do it behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I remember Tom and I were doing something early on, and I can't remember if it was I think it was an underline that we had in a table name or field name, and something wonky happened with that. It was and we learned not to do that. We basically got our hands slapped, and we learned our lesson on that one. But I mean, I know the database name still has an underline in it, so there was something with either the table name or the field name, and we did once we changed that, there wasn't a problem.
Right.
Well, we still have it underlined here. Maybe it was within a field name then.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, your underlines usually weren't that, or underscores weren't that bad. I've always felt you shouldn't have spaces in table names, but
right.
I go back to the SQL Server.
Right. Good stuff. So, Charles, do you have any questions? It looks like it's just people are slowly dropping off. So.
I have lots of questions, but it's probably too late. And but this is definitely very useful.
Good. Well, if you have any questions that you want to bounce, off of me, I'm more than happy to. If I don't know if you have my email address, you can either post a comment on the user group site or my direct email. It's just Andy at worksmartdb, like database.com. Andy at worksmartdb.com. So you're more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I can help it however much I can.
Great, I appreciate that.
Good. Well, good. I'm going to stop the recording here. I appreciate everyone being joining us this time, and we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see you all again in January. So
thanks a lot.
If I don't talk to you, have a happy holiday.
Thank you. You too.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
Bye.